And here in this album of engravings and miscellanea and poems is this pasted in nightmare, which is during the night. And so I had this vision of walking up those ridiculous Ringstrasse steps as if you're going to a ball, and coming into one of the great Kunsthistorische display rooms and having this Kunstbuch, which is never there. It's far too precious and serious to be allowed out very often, open at this nightmare, and to call the whole exhibition during the night, to really look at what happens between waking and sleeping with objects, what happens entre chien et loup, in that moment of transition, of anxiety between going to sleep and waking up, when the world changes. And it's the city of Freud, for goodness sake. So I wanted to bring my id to the fore in Vienna and be let loose, let it loose in the Kunsthistorische Museum with this incredibly compelling during the night image to begin with. And then bring out of the vaults, bring out from the libraries and from the vaults, if I'm allowed, Paulus, some of the most extraordinary objects. I'm sort of have some reputation for minimalism abroad, and the gloriousness. You explain what this is, and then I'll say why I like it.
It's actually a work of art shaped as a drinking vessel, with an ostrich carrying his own egg, which will be the cup, made by Kicklinger in the 1570s, 80s in Augsburg. And it's at the same time, it's something which is very typical for Kunstkammer objects, so that they have a certain shape, there's a certain idea behind, but you would never ever be able to fill this cup with water because it's too fragile.
But for me, it's theatre, it's spectacle. Spectacle is a real world. It's what it's doing is to in a dynamic way to map the world. This is Theatrum Mundi. It's the theatre of the world. So here you've got this is Africa. This is a 16th century vision of Africa. It's also, of course, it's also a nightmare for me. I mean, in the sense that this is the purest expression of more that you could ever have. More is more. No, this is just more that you could have in the world. But this is what Kunstkammer objects do, very, very peculiarly. They've been off the map for so long that to try and bring them into focus is a very interesting and challenging thing. So my Kunstkammer objects include more, this one, and this, which is, well, what is this, Palace?
It's a rock crystal vase, high about 40 centimeters, this tall.
It's ridiculously big.
Made in the first half of the 13th century in Sicily, probably in Sicily. And it's made of, it's carved out of one single piece of rock crystal.
Yeah. So this is fabulous. This is seriously fabulous. This is the biggest sculpture out of rock crystal ever attempted and created in the world. It is monolithic. It's one stone, and that idea of the monolith, which is so powerful in sculpture, right up to now, about what a sculpture might mean and the presence of sculpture. This is extraordinary, because not only is it a kind of the techniques, the praxis, the way in which it's been created, but actually it does incredible things to light. When you see it, it refracts light in extraordinary ways. But the other thing it does is to be unbelievably heavy. I mean, profoundly heavy in the world. It sort of sits in the world, but be completely transparent and full of light at the same time, which is very, very challenging if you care about light. So it's a monolith, and it's more in a different way. And
its stone, it's transparent.
It's transparent. I mean, extraordinary. I mean, speaking as someone who tries to make things which are translucent, which is a ridiculous thing to do. I mean, porcelain is all about translucency, about light coming through something. And so nothing is translucent in the world apart from water. So why would you try and make something translucent? But this does it in an incredible way. So this is my wish. I'm doing this in public because I'm trying to persuade the Kunsthistorische to let me have all these objects. And this is my third fabulous object.
Seychelles nut cup made by Schweinberger, who was court goldsmith at the court of Rudolf II. Well, Schweinberger made only the golden and gilt silver mounts, and the Seychelles nut itself was carved by Pfaff, who was also a court artist at the court of Rudolf II. And what it is, it's again an allegory of the seas, because the Seychelles nut was believed to grow into the sea. And so that's the whole issue of this object.
So, I mean, which poetically, I mean, it's extraordinary. You see, when you look at a piece of contemporary art, the description on the gallery wall of the thing you can't afford is one line long. It's that amount of information which is attached to the technic side when you're buying your piece of contemporary art. And when you look at the description, I mean, Paulus could go on for an hour on this and would. The description of how this is made, who's made it, who's been involved, is pages. It's an extraordinary, again, theatrical piece of entrepreneurship to create this thing for court. But at the very heart of it is something which is incredibly beautiful and incredibly poetic, which is that this nut, this object, this bit of natural life, was floating down a river when it was found. That's the story, that it was floating. And here, that thing which was alive and floating and in motion is now static. But of course, it's not static. It's in Baroque stasis. So it's complete movement. There's no straight line in this. It's a horror object for me in so many ways. And yet it's absolutely at the heart of it something incredibly glorious and beautiful, which is how do you capture something and hold it, which is in constant movement. And so many of these Kunstkammer materials are natural objects which are then transliterated, transformed, brought
into art.
Yeah, into art, and changed. And this
changed.
is my changed.
That's something changing nature, trying to be even better than nature, and things like that. They are all in this Kunstkammer ideas.
So, but the other thing about them, of course, is that they're obviously objects of display. But one of the sort of most interesting things about display, of course, is that it's incredibly dynamic in a Kunstkammer. So if you walked into a Kunstkammer after you've ducked under the crocodile, which is hanging from the door, and you've avoided the extraordinary scientific instrument, which is in perpetual motion, and you've gone past the silver galleon, which fires across the dinner table, and you've done all these things, what you're actually doing is moving through space and moving through the world. So, forget the Deer Foundation for a moment. This is very, very interesting spatially. It's not only mapping the world in terms of where things come from and how they're brought together. So it is definitely a mapping of the world, spatially and temporally, but then actually how things are displayed actually within the Kunstkammer are incredibly dynamic. And as Paolo said, we're all looking at that now because it's very, very alive for artists.
And also what's very important what was important into a Kunstkammer was that those objects were kept in cupboards, closed in cupboards, and they had all their neighborships. So there was not only this object, but there was another one next to it, and probably in the same cupboard there were even natural objects. And by combining, by seeing, by looking at these objects and combining all those things which were combined in the Kunstkammer, you should get a key of things. And that's like I said before, a walkable encyclopedia, and the written text is the objects.
And critically, it's also about repetition. So you know, here's one of these absolutely ridiculous hard stones. This one is
it's mid 16th century handstone, and these handstones, the meaning, the word means actually that if there was found a remarkable sample of ore, it was collected and given to the owner of the mine. And then they were in the 16th century, it started that they were artistically redone. And this is one example which is a combination of different minerals and depicts even the mine where it was found.
So now it's crazy on about 10 levels simultaneously. None of you can see that. Can you see it? You can't see it. Because it tells of the place it comes from. So it's actually already narrative, and very kind of cogent narrative, very very powerful narrative. You know, it's a special thing from a place, and this is how the place works. But then it's transformed into this I have to say very scary landscape. It is very. This fits into my Freud shtick about the Kunsthistorische Museum, that it's very anxious. It's a place of anxiety, which was compounded. I have to say, Paulus, when I went into your stores and found you've got about 100 of these hard stones, all lined up. So part of my request.
Well, it's not 100; it's only 60. But
it's only 60.
It's enough.
But how amazing it would be to have, say, 60. I'm channeling Warhol here. 60 16th century hard stones, all in a line. Again, my career is based around the same thing again and again. But I think they are absolutely compelling, because one of the things that happens when you actually look at them, of course, is that you get lost in them. They are nightmare landscapes. This is the crucifixion, but you have even more worrying ones. Of the Gethsemane, you know, you have extremely have ones which actually are really about places of darkness in miniature. So they're this high, but actually they're all about this extraordinary focus into place and materiality and anxiety. Sorry, this is my final anxious slide, because this is shark's teeth. This is shark's teeth. Petrified in a date which Paulus will now tell me.
Yeah, it's a table decoration with so-called adder's tongues, and this had the function to detect poisons. At the moment when you put it on the table and you have your fruit standing around it, and there's some poison in your drink or in your food, the tongues, the adder's tongues, would start to sweat. And you would know that there's poison inside. So that's an idea.
I mean, that's the show. I mean, you know, come on. If you could just have that, plus Freud's first edition of the Interpretation of Dreams and a bit of Dürer, and that's enough. It's a really really anxious object. You know, the thing is that we're not used to seeing 16th, 17th century objects as objects of anxiety. We see them as objects of skill, of the translation of skill in it, you know, and we read them as sort of cultural or art historical texts. But in fact, they're real moments of crystallization of particular thinking about problems. I mean, the poison thing is very interesting, because actually porcelain was used in the Middle Ages in the same. There are very, very few porcelain objects come all the way from China to Europe, but when they do, there's this great legend that if you're an emperor or a pope, you could drink from a porcelain cup and not be poisoned.